Have you checked the children? Your little master.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Long days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime and Fuego, and if it please you, join me here for a bit of palaver on Wow, yeah, really? Okay, yeah. To Stephen King, let's do it, everybody. Just call me Fuego for short, and I cordially welcome you to the horror show, where I do this Stephen King show every single Saturday. And yeah, as you can see by the tower of tomes behind me, that Cy King, none other than El Rey, Stephen King is my favorite writer on the planet. It took me about 7 years to get through all of his stuff, and I hit that milestone a couple years ago, and this program has been going for over 3 years, over 200 episodes at this particular point, and I am stoked to be for its 25th anniversary today, discussing with you none other than the ABC adaptation of the Langoliers. Yeah, this was originally broadcast May 14th and 15th, if I recall correctly, in 1995, and it was written and directed by none other than Tom Holland, who, previous to this, had done Child's Play. He had done the original Fright Night. I mean, he had a prestigious kind of, back catalog already, and then about a year later, I think he went on to do Thinner, the adaptation of the Richard Bachman book. So yeah, he already had great stuff before, and he was about to do, in my estimation, with Thinner, a very solid adaptation thereafter. But this is unfortunately one that is incredibly dated, not in my estimation because of the acting as much, but most definitely because of the special effects. And thankfully, that doesn't really rear its strange little Pac-Man with larger, sharper teeth. It's like the effects of these creatures once we finally get them, and this isn't really me spoiling stuff, because if you boot up this DVD, okay, the one that I just showed you, you see them on the title screen. And probably a lot of viewers, if they didn't see this when it originally aired, I did watch it when it originally aired because it was post The Stand. I can't remember if Tommyknockers had already been released or not, or if that came shortly thereafter, but we were in this 90s heyday of adapting not just King stuff, but Dean Koontz had some miniseries in the 90s, a few other, like horror and spectacular writers. It was the heyday of the network television miniseries adaptation, and obviously being network television as opposed to, an HBO or Showtime or Cinemax, or in this day and age, even some of the, not premium, but still very reputable cable channels, like AMC and, even TNT is up their game a little bit, and, various others, FX being another one. I mean, there's only so much that you can do when you are in those constraints of network television, especially in the 90s where, they, with the exception of a couple shows on ABC at the time, I think like NYPD Blue was letting them just tackle more mature subject matter and stuff, but I mean, the source material of this particular novella, which was originally in the September release, September 24th, 1990, was where this story originally showed up, which was in 4 Past Midnight. And 4 Past Midnight is a terrific collection. It legitimately rivals, it's right up there with Different Seasons and with Full Dark No Stars for me. Those three, they all have their merits, and it's ongoing debate. But at least as far as the notoriety of Different Seasons, I think it's right up there with it. And all 4 stories, including The Library Policeman, The Sundog, both of those never being adapted, which I really, really enjoy. And then Secret Window, which was done with Johnny Depp. Pretty good, not too bad, John Turturro also being in that one. But yeah, so The Langoliers first appeared in print form in this September 1990 novella collection. And that is, as you can see, right up there on my shelf. But yeah, man, this is, I enjoy the concept more so than anything. And the acting isn't terrible. It's, once again, once you get into the nitty-gritty of everything that is actually happening, which you really don't even see. This was a 2-parter, as I said. It runs about 3 hours, and you really don't even see until the final hour these creatures that are in the DVD load screen. And it's really more so not what not what they are and what they do, but what they represent as you get more so into the story. And I don't know how much I want to spoil here for those who haven't actually watched this before or read the novella. So I'm going to try to tread lightly, as I all too often do on this. But yeah, so essentially it was filmed in and around the Bangor International Airport. And they also did some additional exteriors at LAX. But it's really the fact that we have real planes at times, and then there's others where we have this digitized plane for a lot of the aerial shots that, I mean, between that and the aforementioned creatures, it's like I was playing a Windows 95 game on my computer, and some of the computer graphics that you would have on that looked very just choppy and poor resolution and so on and so forth. But hey, I mean, they did what they could at the time. It's really the cast, I think, that you've got a lot of noteworthy names, but it was in many ways noteworthy names that had like television prestige and stuff, and this being not a Stephen King feature film. That in the mid-90s, man, there weren't as many Stephen King feature films being made as before. So obviously in like the late 70s and the 80s and stuff, it was long before we started getting more so into these King miniseries. It was the late 80s and then the 90s when it became more so just, I don't want to say polluted, but definitely congested, I think is a better way of putting it. You know, I mean, everything from the golden years to the Tommyknockers to the Stephen King remake to even as they forged later on into it and into the next century. I mean, Storm of the Century, fantastic. That's one of the best, direct for the smaller screen. And then, you had Rose Red and Kingdom Hospital. So while there was still like a sprinkling in that period of theatrical Stephen King stuff that was coming through the pipeline, but it really, I mean, even Desperation was a mini-series on television. Bag of Bones, made for television. So there was a while when King was falling a little bit out of the favor of the mainstream that it had shifted significantly from the theatrical to just the television format. And in that regard, it's tough to adapt King with some of the more extreme themes that he goes after, into this kind of defanged and declawed sort of format, But thankfully with, the most recent Return of the King that I've been talking about for over 3 years at this particular point, since it and the resurgence in 2017, now we are seeing more premium networks that are doing stuff for King and, more R-rated films and stuff like that, which I am all for. But, I mean, if you rattle off all of these names, I mean, first and foremost, we've got Patricia Wedig, and she plays the school teacher in this, and she bonds immediately with Dinah, who is this girl who is blind and who is going to get this operation. So, I mean, as far as like framing devices go, everybody gets on this plane from LA to Boston, and it's a red eye, and everybody who is asleep as this flight is going wakes up to a plane that is still flying, and there is nobody else on it except for everybody who has just awakened. There's nobody actually flying it, nobody in the cockpit, all the stewardesses, all of the presumably awake passengers, they're all gone. There's only 10 people left on it, and one of which is the aforementioned Patricia Wedig, as I said, who is a grade school teacher, who is going to meet a love interest / pen pal kind of thing. This was long before the days of Tinder, everybody. And so, yeah, she's on her way to Boston to just go on a blind date with somebody she's been corresponding with for a while. That's creepy stalker status. I couldn't even imagine people trying to do that sort of dating back in the 90s. It's frightening to me, and even before, Dear John letters and, missed, I don't know, I have friends who have lived in New York, and they talked about the Village Voice and some of the other papers over there where it was like missed connections or whateverness. But, so she was a 3-time Emmy winner for some work on television, and then she had also been in City Slickers, both of them if I remember correctly, because I recognized her from the Billy Crystal movie. So she's there. Then you've got Dean Stockwell, and he was Oscar nominated for, he was an Oscar nom. He was on Battlestar Galactica, the newer version of it, so a lot of people will think of him for that. He was also briefly on Quantum Leap, and that is the dude, if I'm not mistaken, who plays the mystery writer. So of course, Stephen King has to have a mystery writer or a writer of some sort. It's either a writer or a teacher, and we have both of those on display here. You write what you know, I suppose. But so yeah, this is the guy that as they find themselves in this strange predicament, he segues into all of the deduction and trying to like Sherlock Holmes this shizzle. But yeah, Stockwell is good. And then a face you will definitely recognize, especially if you've watched Frank Darabont's The Green Mile, you've got David Morse. And David Morse, the first time I saw him was as a kid watching St. Elsewhere with my parents. It was the first doctor drama that I ever saw in the 80s when I was, you know, very, very, very young in the 80s. And I remember Howie Mandel was on there. I think Denzel Washington was on there too, but David Morse was one of the key players on there. I think he was there 5 or 6 seasons, something like that. But, I mean, I always will remember him from The Green Mile and, you know, being one of Tom Hanks' subordinates and whatnot. And then he also has a Emmy nomination under his belt for House, that dope doctor drama that was very unconventional with the methods of Dr. House. And so David Morse is here. He plays a captain who is initially just about to go off on a flight. And then so he's a pilot of some of these planes, and he finds out his ex-wife, who he still obviously cares about, has died. He's told about it right before he's about to take off. So they take him off that plane and they put him on this plane because he's trying to go back and, you know, get to Boston and try to sort some stuff out for her, see family perhaps on her side, and, you know, make amends, see what he can assist with. And so he ends up on this flight. And then you've got Mark Lindsay Chapman. And Mark Lindsay Chapman, interestingly enough, from both the original Titanic film, you know, I'm the king of the world, yeah, Mr. Jimmy Cam, and but more so than anything for me, the one that I remembered him from, as I'm looking at this guy who's like this British secret agent assassin kind of dude, and I was like, where the hell have I seen him? He looks, I mean, he's done up in the film I'm thinking of, but he played John Lennon in a film called Chapter 27, where Jared Leto gained a grotesque amount of weight to play the killer of John Lennon. Yeah, so the obsessive fan, you know, who was there in New York and, you know, got to the spot where he was going to do it and had all the second thoughts, and then, you know, went through all of those connective cases. And they actually talk about this on Cursed Films, which, if you guys haven't watched Cursed Films on Shudder recently, it's dope, it's very fascinating, and they talk briefly about this murder of John Lennon and the obsessive fan who did it. But I guess Leto wanted to go full method, which doesn't surprise me with some of the stuff he's done on different sets, with what he did for Dallas Buyers Club. I mean, the guy definitely goes for it, man, as far as losing weight, gaining weight, and as opposed to doing the Nutty Professor thing with Eddie Murphy and putting prosthetics on, or the Big Mama's House bit, he actually gained the weight. And, I mean, you can see it's Jared Leto, but... So anyway, this dude, Mark Lindsay Chapman, who plays our proverbial guy who was on his way to murder somebody in the name of the British, you know, I don't know, Secret Service or whatever, on Her Majesty's Secret Service. And I'm thinking of George Lazenby as James Bond suddenly for whatever weird reason. But yeah, so he's in this, and he played John Lennon in that particular film, and he's a pivotal character in this. And then you've got Frankie Faison, who is this awesome black actor who doesn't get as much screen time in this as I would have personally preferred. And, you know, he was in all 4 Hannibal movies, which is nuts. So he was in Michael Mann's Manhunter, and then he doesn't reprise the role, if I recall correctly, but he was totally in all 3 of the Anthony Hopkins Hannibal trilogy. So, yeah, he was in Silence, he was in Hannibal, he was in Red Dragon. Yeah, he's in there. And he also was on 40 episodes of The Wire. I know lots of peeps will recognize him from that. And for King fans, though, he's in Maximum Overdrive. I mean, come on. So you might recognize Frankie. And they do like bringing a lot of these same Stephen King actors from other projects into new ones. And I mean, look at Kathy Bates even doing Between Dolores and Misery. And, you know, various others that have played alternate roles, and, you know, directors that come back like Mick Garris. I mean, you know, Flanagan, which is working on Revival, and I'm just going nuts about that. So in any event, we're trying to soldier through, and then you've got Kristopher Collet, and everybody, if it's at least not that far removed enough, you'll probably recognize him as Paul from Sleepaway Camp. He plays another one of the 10 survivors that awakens, and he is a violinist that's on his way to music school. And he ends up getting close with this girl who was going to see her aunt, but is presumably going to get dumped into rehab. And she's very much of the mid-90s. She's almost got like the Tank Girl style going on. She's not an actress of note, so I didn't really have much down about her, just like I don't have anything about the dude who awakens last after everybody else has. And he's just like really hungry. He just needs his sandwich like the entire goddamn movie. And there's no development. There's like donuts, you know, going down for homeboy there. But really the guy who chews up the scenery, as some have said, even more than the Langoliers themselves, who are chewing up reality by the end of this film. And that's a mild spoiler, I suppose, but you have to know where the context of the name comes from. And the name the Langoliers comes from this particular character. And he's played by none other than Bronson Pinchot, and he is, believe it or not, an American actor. When I was watching this with Catherine, she was like, that's a French actor. Was this filmed in French Canada or whatever? And I'm like, no, pretty sure. I mean, everybody knows him from Perfect Strangers. That's what I know him from. He was on maybe 6, 7, 8 seasons of that wacky show. And then I also remember him guesting on like Step by Step and some of the other weird TGIF shit that I watched back in the day as a kid. But long story short, he is this businessman that has kind of screwed over his company, and he's on his way on this red eye to Boston to try to make amends with the board of directors. And he is the one that just goes nuts when he finds out that this situation has transpired. He's like, how do I get to Boston? You were supposed to get me to Boston. And he's going nuts on, you know, our homie played by David Morris, who is the pilot going to, you know, figure out what happened with his dead wife, who has to suddenly try to land the plane. Very convenient injection in the storytelling of, you know, this guy being on the flight. But hey, you know, Ka is, you know, it's a very strict taskmaster, and, you know, like destiny and all that different stuff. I guess it was part of some strange plan, you know, from Gan or whatever. But nonetheless, Pinchot's character is flipping the fuck out, and he becomes, as they land the plane and they're in Bangor, he becomes this just sociopathic psycho, and he basically becomes the villain that is there on the ground, like, you know, ground zero, and that can actually affect them directly. But it's uncovering the mysteries of everything else that's transpiring that I find fascinating about this story. I really, really like this story. It's just, unfortunately, some of the mid-90s cheese, the budget specifically, and some of those effects bits that I mentioned. But really, and how did I not mention Dinah? Dinah's character, who is the young blind girl. How did I miss that? Terrible, terrible, Fuego. Her name is Kate Maberly, and she was in 1993's Secret Garden, which had come out like a year or so before, obviously, produced by Francis Ford Coppola, and she is a British actress, and she's very good in this. I mean, maybe not as much initially, but as the conflict really starts to get more heated and the danger escalates, there is something that happens with her. She's injured, and her scenes are very touching and, I mean, heartbreaking to a degree as you try to wrap your head around if this child is actually going to survive or not after being injured. And, you know, once they're on the airplane, once they are on the, you know, the actual terminal and just going around and seeing that there's nobody there, no electricity, nothing going on, this is where a lot of interesting things all just kind of come together, you know, in the fact that, so people have disappeared, first and foremost. That's the big thing. So you land this plane and there is nobody there. There's nobody at the airport. There's nobody in any of the terminals. There's nobody, you know, out there, you know, delivering luggage, loading things on the planes, nothing. Donuts, zip, zilch, nada. Clocks have stopped, at least once they hit the ground. All of their clocks had stopped when they were on the plane, but they do at least get those rotating a little bit. The food has no taste, you know, when they're trying to actually have something to eat, you know, once they're on the terminal, the matches won't even light. So the girl who thinks she's going to end up in rehab, she goes to smoke a cigarette, and her matches light that were with her on the plane, but when she tries to, you know, get some from, you know, whatever concession place, food restaurant, whatever, none of those light. So it's like everything is frozen in time, or like in some behind sort of situation, and guns aren't even shooting naturally. There is a scene in particular where our bad guy from Perfect Strangers tries to, what's his name, Toomey, if I recall correctly. Well, it's relatively inconsequential, but yeah, Toomey. But nonetheless, he tries to shoot somebody, and it just kind of, it goes and it slows and almost like bounces off. So the laws of physics, everything as far as regularity and, you know, I mean, just normality, it's not there in whatever dimension they have gone through. And yeah, I mean, sound echoes in a weird fashion, and that's where they start to kind of piece together when the pilot, our dude who's going to see his deceased wife and sort some of that stuff out, when he realizes that when he was about to board the plane, they were talking about the Aurora Borealis was having a very strange just sighting of sorts, you know, for that particular time of the year. And so they, in turn, theorize, okay, we flew through some sort of strange thinny portal, whatever you want to describe it as, and that's why they're in this weird alternate dimension. They're like, is everybody dead, or are we like behind in time and time has moved forward and we're just stuck here? It poses a lot of very fascinating questions, and at least when you find out the true name of the Langoliers, I do remember them giving it a little bit more credence and personality and interest in the novella. But it's all about Perfect Strangers dude who had this overbearing father who was like just instilling within him the fact that Langoliers, who they were basically just hair, teeth, and fast little legs, they go after people who have no purpose, because they are purpose personified. And so those who aren't driven, those who aren't aspiring towards goals and aspirations and all this other stuff, the Langoliers go after those sort of people and they just eat them up. And so that's at least where the name comes from. That's how it factors in this. The flashback stuff with Perfect Strangers dude as a kid, it's okay, you know, and then he's basically losing his mind. He's going bat shizzle crazy bonkers status, and he starts seeing his father, and his father is the one who is like compelling him to kill these people, and it's a little convoluted after a while, but I must say the chemistry between the younger music student and between our mystery writer is very good. Also, the friendship that forms between our pilot and our British secret agent guy. He has kind of a little late blooming love interest thing with a grade school teacher who is caring for Dinah, the blind girl. I didn't buy into that bit as much. It happens very late in the game. It's kind of throwaway, not as developed as I would have liked. And then the other characters, as I mentioned, it's kind of a bum that, goodness, where is his name again? Frankie Faison. His character, there's like really nothing that they have him do. He's going to visit his first grandchild in Boston, and he's a military guy who works on planes and stuff like that. So he's very underdeveloped. Sandwich Guy, I'm trying to remember if Sandwich Guy is even in the original novella, or if he was just put in there for some sort of stupid, just, I don't know, comic relief or whateverness. So yeah, but it's interesting in the way they film what Dinah sees, because despite her blindness, she has the touch, she has the power. So, The Shining, or, just a psychic kind of foreshadowing, telepathy. There's so many different names for, powers of this sort, but she ends up linked up with Toomey, the Perfect Strangers guy's character. And so, there's times where she sees through his eyes almost to a degree, and then also where she can see the other passengers, and yet their faces are like melted in and creepy. That's where I think if this had a bigger budget, if it was allowed to be an R-rated film in comparison that Tom Holland did, because Thinner is terrific in my opinion. I really love that adaptation, and the aforementioned stuff that Tom Holland had done before, like, Fright Night and Child's Play. These were movies with budgets, and these were movies that were gritty and had more of an edge to them, and I do still see that as possibility for this story. If there's anything Stephen King that definitely should be remade at this particular point, especially with all of our fear of flying currently, with all of the different nasty things going on as far as, the Rona, as people are calling it, the Rona. It's millennial terminology, man. I don't get it, but so yeah, I think that people are just scared of airports in general right now because of everything that's going on in this world, and people have always been scared of airports, man. I mean, I still think of Passenger 57, I think of Air Force One, I think of even the Flight or Fright compilation that was assembled by Bev Vincent that had that new Stephen King story about the guy going on the plane and he's almost like a pseudo assassin-y sort of person, but really the one that wowed me so much was Joe Hill's story in that collection, where it's about World War III and Armageddon essentially transpiring down on the ground, and these people being on a plane that's trying to touch down, and they can't, and they're just flying in circles, and they're eventually all gonna run out of fuel and die up there, and that should... Man, that story messed me up. It's super disturbing. It's in both Flight or Fright, and it's also in Full Throttle, which is Joe Hill's newest collection of stories that he put out recently. So, I don't know, man. I think that people are definitely very scared of planes and airports and all that other stuff, so a remake of this could really have something interesting to do. But, Dinah's hallucinations, I mentioned already. The paper ripping, which is a weird neurotic thing that Perfect Strangers Toomey dude starts doing when he's still on the plane after he gets like punched out a little bit, and because he starts freaking out and he thinks he can just dictate his will and be a super schmuck bag and get what he wants, and everybody bands against him, and they're like, nah man, this isn't happening. Once down at the airport, they actually subdue him, but he does wreak some havoc and some blood is shed, so that does happen without spoiling things. But there is a Stephen King cameo. I didn't want to forget to mention that, and it's near the end of the film, and it's where Toomey has this hallucination where he envisions himself at that board meeting back in Boston that he was trying to get himself to, and this isn't a spoiler or anything. So he basically approaches the table, and you see all these older bigwig, like, you know, just kind of corporate idiot, you know, who cares about the, you know, people below us, let's make as much money as possible. And at the other head of the table is none other than, alright, it's Stephen King. This was when he was still really about the cameos and stuff. And he still had the buck teeth, which is really endearing to a degree before he had the dental work done. But he's like, well, Toomey, how much have you made for us? And blah, blah, blah. And it's just a funny little Easter egg interaction. I always smile when I see King in these 80s and 90s, you know, films and television series and stuff like that. As I said, it's over 2/3 of the time until we see these Langoliers, and they are like somewhere between, you know, Pac-Man 3D and the Critters. I don't know. But Holland, again, you know, he wrote the Psycho 2 script. I forgot about that. And Mick Garris directed that. He also did some great episodes of Tales from the Crypt, you know. So Holland, for writing this script, it's really, for me, it's not as much what he did poorly as what he had within his ability with the various constraints to actually accomplish here. And so they do kind of figure out the riddle of sorts of, okay, you know, nothing is working here, but will it work on the plane? Because they realize we can't stay here. You know, we have to actually try to get back and fly back through whatever weird portal we went through. Maybe if we plotted the same flight trajectory, we could go back through and, you know, maybe turn back up in our proper time and space and place and all of that. Although there is an interesting catch-22 that as I was rewatching this last night, I had forgotten about as they are approaching it, and I was just like, oh shit, that's right. How... I'm not spoiling stuff, but it's just good writing on King's part, you know? I mean, this is a very fascinating scenario, and I blame more so, once again, just the environment and the constraints that were placed on Mr. Holland. There is a bit near the end with Dinah that I have to mention, and it was a great bit of dialogue, and it's where she's like, I saw through Mr. Toomey's eyes. Everything was beautiful, even the things that were dead. It was so wonderful. And that little actress does, in the second half of in basically the second part after the injury takes place that I mentioned, she does a killer job. She's really, really good. I really like the Dinah character, and I sympathize with her significantly, and I feel like as the film ramps up in the back half and you understand a little bit more of what's transpiring, that young actress does do a great job, and she has a lot of other stuff from theater, television, and film that is on her IMDb. And then upon sight of this weird aurora borealis, like going through this thingy or whatever you want to classify it as, there is one character that looks at it, and this is something King has explored a lot, you know, so don't expect the most unique thing in that regard, but basically the character's like, oh my god, it's so beautiful, just gazing into, I'm thinking of The Jaunt, for God's sake, and even though that doesn't really have as much context here, but, you know, oh my god, it's so beautiful, just gazing into the endless and gazing, it's like peering into infinity sort of thing, and I really really dug that part. One gripe that I have to mention as I wrap this up is, so after they first pass through and everybody's waking up and they're seeing stuff like fillings and watches and all of these different things that, you know, would have been like inside a person's body. You know, Dinah feels somebody's wig and she thinks like it's somebody's head, so they've lost their wig. But seriously, guys, if watches and rings and all these other things are gonna fall off, why the hell didn't their clothes fall off? Derp. Yeah. Should have thought that one through a little bit more. So, but aside from a couple minor gripes like that, I still enjoy the Langoliers. Is it one that I would like frequently revisit? Not a chance, unfortunately. It's very middle of the road, but it's not Sleepwalkers, you know? I mean, it's a little bit better than Tommyknockers. Some may argue with me about that, or Golden Years. I know there's some Golden Years apologists out there. It's just very much of that middle of the road, solid, but definitely not great Stephen King television stuff that was happening all throughout the 90s. And yeah, it is what it is, but I would love to see a director tackle this, make it far more horror. There's a lot more that you can do with it, but I mean, it does have a solid enough cast, you know, reputable performances, but nothing that's gonna, like, you know, I mean, this didn't get any, you know, I don't know, Emmy nominations or anything of that nature, but still, if you've never seen The Langoliers, I would probably recommend to read it, not to watch this, but hey, if you want a visual representation, check this one out. And yeah, lastly, they end it with, everybody does like a little jump freeze frame thing, and I was like, or at least people who were left, you know, without spoiling things, and I'm just like, did we really just do that? Did we really like a bump, 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 bump? They did it! They did it. So, bring me the Leaning Tower of Chisa. So, in any event, I've been Jaime and Fuego. Y'all can find moi on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, where I also have my own personal YouTube channel. Got like 15 subscribers to hitting the 1,000. And yes, I know that that's nothing compared to the near 33 that we have here on the Horror Show. But nonetheless, if you jumped over to Infuegotainment, just search Infuegotainment on YouTube, and yeah, just did the little subscribe thing and watch some of my videos where it's primarily geektastic stuff. I do, like, you know, Star Wars stuff, comedies, but also some art house drama and thrillers and crime stuff and whatnot. Stuff that isn't quite as spooktacular as you would see over here. I would greatly appreciate it. But obviously, like, share, subscribe this video, use the #Tizzle, hail to Stephen King, and yeah, it's supremely appreciated there. And I also have to give a shout out to everybody in the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group. It's really the only thing that gets me on Facebook, because I love the palaver with the Ka-Tet over there. We just have, you know, one day a week where we let you segue into other discussion, which is Friday Freakouts. I've been thinking about adding a Manic Monday, but hasn't happened just yet. The rest of the time, it's talking nothing but Cy King and his family. So, Joe Hill, Owen, Tabby, I mean, yeah, if it's anything else related to King and his work, it is just nonstop awesome discussion about that. Great for just dipping your toe in for the first time if you're new to the world of Stephen King and have only seen or read a few things, or if you are a hardcore CR Tower junkie like myself, there's also that too. We have a nice just variety of that sort of discussion. Great kef with everybody there. And I must say that we do a monthly Book of the Month, and that is none other than what you see back there. If It Bleeds, I already have a spoiler-free review that I put out right when the book came out, but we are going to be doing a live stream on June 6th and discussing the book in-depth, spoilerific status. So, I've been Fuego, y'all have been awesome, and until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, everyone, hasta luego, sin amigos, constant readers and viewers alike in this case, say thank you, but I'm hopeful that we share more of this palaver sooner rather than later, and until then, stay scared and read Stephen King. Yes, definitely in this instance, as much as I have a soft spot, yeah, read The Langoliers and For Best Midnight.